have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Nathan Hamay, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Greetings and welcome back to the one and only Dr. J Radio Live show, where we bring you information that you are not going to hear on Fox News, CNN, or BBC. As you know, this is truly an international radio show. As you know, I am your humble host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels. Now, I'm proud to say that my London co-host, where it's normally 3 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, happens to be in the studio with me, Johnny Webb. And, of course, we have the rest of the Dr. J Radio Live team on board. And I hope you guys are ready for a super power hour with a really awesome guest talking on very, very important issues. Many things that will surprise you, but you can look it up for yourself and find out for them to be true. Let me just say, right as I introduce him, he has a book, a fabulous book, which I've had a chance to go through before the show tonight. It is Spiritual Science, Higher Consciousness Thinking, and How to Access Universal Consciousness, with a small subtitle, Learn How to Expand the Power of the Mind at Every Level of Existence. This is available by going to drjradiolive.com and clicking on books and videos. Scroll your name down to, now I'm going to spoil the guest's name, Aage Nost, and click on his name. It'll take you right to his author's page, and there you can get it. Without further ado, since I've already spoiled it and said his name, I am going to bring him on. Mr. Nost, welcome to the show.
Hello there.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. And first thing, before we go into consciousness and all this other stuff, I want to talk about something that you told me that blew me away, that I know is going to blow everybody away when they find out this is true. Talk about, if you can, the Nobel Prize that was awarded for the person who discovered something, which is, in essence, what people have been talking about for thousands of years, the elusive fountain of youth.
Yeah, the fountain of youth is a term that is probably a little misleading in this case, because in 2009, and I want to say that you can go to the Nobel Committee's website, go to 2009, scroll down until you get to medical submissions, and you read what it says, and you will find that the Nobel Prize was given to 3 doctors that discovered an enzyme that reverses the aging process, and nobody hardly seems to know about it.
Exactly. Just like I said, mainstream information, you're not going to get this. Now, you and I are in America, so is a lot of the Dr. J Radio Live team, but most of the listeners are not. You know, they're spread around the entire globe. As you know, we have 3 networks in America playing this show, as well as a network in the UK, and anybody in every country can access this who has internet or just a phone, or some sort of method such as iTunes or Shoutcast or TuneIn or whatever you call it. The point is, we've received so many questions and calls, and that's why I want to say, if you're watching BBC or Fox or CNN, you're not going to hear about this at all, ever. Just like you didn't hear about the water-powered car or anything like that. That would be a revolutionary breakthrough that would change mankind for the better.
Yeah, and the saying, that is just plain and simple, that there is no money in the solution, there is only money in the problem. So we know where that goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, let's talk about your book a little bit. Can you talk to us about consciousness first? Let's go into consciousness and how everybody on this planet has the power to access their higher self, or access what some call the Akashic records or other call the universal records of humanity. And not just humanity, of the universe, multiverse.
Yes, absolutely. That is one of my favorite subjects to talk about, and we'll do that. And for those, though, that is sitting on the edge of the chair here with a pen and a piece of paper to learn more about immortality, I write very specifically, quite lengthy about that in the book, explain the process and what people have to do. And it's so simple. Even I can do it. And in fact, I am doing it. And it's showing a result. So there is more in the book about that. So you can look at that sometime. But when we look at consciousness, where does that bring us? When we bring up that term, what actually does it mean? It means conscious something. What is consciousness? Science in the past, they could not prove that consciousness even existed. But we're finding out that the world is not just the way that we have been told.
That's right. Never has been.
And the thing is that we now getting a new form of science that comes on the scene. It's called quantum mechanics.
That's right. That's right.
And what we're finding is that when they start, the theoretical physicists start working out the equations on that, then we are finding out that we live in a mind-created universe. Let me just give you something to think about. Let me first set the stage a little bit, and I'll ask you a question. It'll be easier to understand the question.
Sure.
Science has found that matter and energy cannot be created from nothing.
That's right.
We've been told that. At least I learned that in college. When again, we have the sharpest people on the planet, like Stephen Hawking at Cambridge University in England and most other theoretical physicists, they are saying now that their equations on the blackboard prove this universe was created from nothing. And of course, if this whole universe was created from nothing, and you are in this universe created from nothing, what are you?
And here's another major thing. What about the fact that we finally understood that gravity can manipulate the space-time continuum? This is something that for hundreds of years or maybe thousands of years was talked about as science fiction, as mythology, but now we find it to be true. If you can control gravity, you can alter the space-time continuum and therefore hence time travel, which is why a lot of these extraterrestrial craft are not just at point A to point B, super lunar speeds. They're actually time machines, interdimensional machines, right?
Yeah. Yes. A lot of them are interdimensional machines, but some of them are also the ones that have to spend time to go somewhere.
That's right. Because different evolutions, right?
Yeah. And, different forms of science. You know, when you're talking about time travel, mental time travel and physical time travel are two different things, but expressions of the same thing.
Well, let's talk about mental time travel because that has something to do with accessing your consciousness, right?
Yes, it does. And it goes all back to this thing that we are finding now we live in a mind-created universe. So everything you see around you got to be mind created. What does a mind do? It creates. It stores memory.
One of my great friends and another great friend was able to confirm this thought because I've always thought about this, and the way I put it was a different way. For instance, let's go back 5,000 years. If you see a bird flying in the sky, then in your dream, you're going to dream about flying. But if you had never seen anything fly, nothing would fly. Hence, what Giorgio Tsoukalos, host of Ancient Aliens, confirmed by my good friend Eric von Doniken, whose 40th book, by the way, Chariots of the Gods Part 2, I was able to get published, and you will see my endorsement on the back, also agreed with this, that no thought comes from a vacuum. You've had to experience it somehow to mix it with your life and then create it into reality. So if you've never seen something bizarre looking, or you've never seen something fly, you're not going to put those two things together in your head and dream about it, correct?
Yeah, it can look that way. And that actually supports the stories coming out of South America some 500 years ago when the Europeans first showed up. The ships, they came up to the shore, but the natives there, they'd never seen anything like that before, so they did not recognize them. They
That's
did not
right.
even notice them.
That's absolutely right. And that goes to show this. One of my good friend researchers, Preston Dennett, talked about a case where there was a woman. She was a regular experiencer with extraterrestrials. And when she was on the New York subway, what happened is there was a gray alien, right? And this gray alien, nobody could see, but she could see only. And I was wondering that the fact that since, of course, that was, that happened, that just goes back to the point that nobody else, if they don't see it, they don't believe it. If they don't know what it is, they don't believe it. Just like 500 years ago when the Spaniards, I believe,
Yeah.
came into Southern America.
Yeah, and that now there is another way to look at this, and that is that at UCLA in California, they had done some experiments where they hooked up somebody to electrodes on their head, and they were monitoring the brainwave patterns, and they were then actually what they were seeing is the map of the thoughts that were going on in the head, and they had. When they showed them different pictures, then they could kind of see what was normal for the visualized brainwave pattern. And then they threw them oddball pictures into it that was really rough.
Yes.
Violence and so on. But the thing is that the brain reacted to it about a second before the picture showed up on the screen.
You know what I like about that? Have you ever heard about the 7-second stare study?
No.
It was in the 1800s. Some scientist was studying telepathy or thought control. And just like you said, this is mainstream now, where people have gone into laboratories and have tested what the thought would be. It's binary, and you're very primitive as opposed to being able to express a full expression. It's either this or that or yes or no. But the point was the 7-second stare study. What happens is if you're staring at someone from behind them for 7 seconds, within 7 seconds, they get the feeling somebody is looking at me, and they will look around. If anybody is questioning this, I'm urging you to try this, and you will find it that 90%, if not more, of the people will come back and look at you.
Yeah, I've actually done this, walking down the street. I walk behind someone, and I stare right at the nape of the neck, and I stare a little longer than 7 seconds, but after a while, they start looking around and looking behind them.
You know, when I went to Tony Robbins, and I went there after interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Michael Aquino, PhD, who taught at the U.S. Army JFK School of Warfare, PSYOPs division, psychological warfare, and he wrote a book called Mind War, where if you can control the 5 senses of people, that you can essentially, control them, and he used Hitler as an example for his first book. And this book, it was a manuscript, and he published it, and fortunately I was able to place it in the hands of the Canadian Defense Department and the UK Ministry of Defense. Now, Tony Robbins talked about something different. It's called building rapport. Aside from building rapport with speech, he talked about building rapport mentally and subconsciously. And what he said was that if you let's just say you're sitting behind a woman who's in a chair in front of you. She crosses her leg, cross your leg at the same time. If she pace your breathing to be the same as hers. If she takes her right arm and comes up and uses her right fingers to push her hair behind her right ear, do the same. After about 5 minutes or so, do something nonchalant, such as taking your left fingers and, doing the same, even though you don't have long hair, and put it behind your ear, just as if you had long hair. What's going to happen? Within a few seconds, that's what you're going to see. She will do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I found to be so incredible when I started practicing this.
Mm-hmm. Neuro-linguistic programming.
NLP, that's right, NLP.
Yep. Yeah. And I tell you, the mind is such an enormous tool, and we have no clue on how to use it. In fact, let me give you an analogy. If we took Mr. Average, that could be absolutely anybody off the street, and put him in the cockpit of a Boeing 747, stuck him in the left seat at the captain's chair.
Captain's seat, that's right.
And told him, let's go flying. He wouldn't have a clue. He would be looking for 20 minutes before he even found the master switch. Now, if we gave him a year's worth of training in that Boeing 747, it's going to take that long,
yes,
and put him back in the seat and told him, let's go flying, he could take us flying. Same thing with the mind. We have never been taught how to use the mind. In fact, photographic memory is something that everybody has, and as a little kid, before they get taught how to using it. And in my book, I explain how to use that mind, the shortcuts, and the tricks and the trades, and how to become a super mind. And it is so simple. Now, it's not easy because it's a little effort on our part, but it's simple. We can actually get that mind to do things we thought were impossible before, like assimilating information out of a book at the rate of 100,000 words per minute with 95% retention.
That's right, that's right. And Shannon Panzo, through his course, actually wrote about that, has a course,
yes,
ZoxPro, and we sponsor it. Everybody out there, ZoxPro.com/Dr. J, DRJ, and you will actually get it.
Yeah, 20 years ago, I used to teach that course.
You did?
Yeah.
And tell us
we
about
had
it.
so much fun with it. I mean, we had dyslexic kids that came there. They couldn't hardly read at all. After 5 evenings of classes, they were reading with everybody else, 50,000 words per minute, and scored 80s and 90s on the tests they were given. It's amazing what the mind can do if it is taught how to do it right.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Now, another thing I wanted to go back to, of course, is what you were mentioning about immortality. Mm-hmm. How can we achieve immortality using our brain?
Well, in order for that one, let me tell you a quick story. In the mid-1950s, there was a Chinese university professor that came to New York on an exchange program. And he, one evening, went out with some colleagues, and they had dinner. He got food poisoning. Then what happened usually is that he ends up at the morgue, and they start looking at his papers, and they said, something's wrong here. So they called the ambassador for China and said, hey, what's wrong with this guy? The passport shows that he's 154 years old. That can't be right. The ambassador told him, yes, that is right. And they said, how can that happen? That can't happen. Well, this ambassador said, first of all, he said, he did not believe he could die. And for the second, he only ate herbs and berries, Chinese herbs and berries. That was all that he ate. And I just happened to know what kind those herbs and berries were.
Exactly.
You want to know?
Yeah, tell us.
Okay.
What are those berries that he was eating that made
Yeah.
him that
In
way.
fact, more than that, actually, I found another Chinese that the government on several occasions verified his age to be 256 years old. He got killed in an accident because he was a martial art teacher for the army in China for as long as anybody had known, but he got in an accident and got killed. But he was that old. And he ate the same thing. And for those of you that have a pen, maybe just find something to write on, because this is good. He ate Chinese herbs and berries, and those were ling shi.
Ling shi, those were the berries. I'm assuming that comes
that's-
from somewhere in Asia, right?
It's in Asia somewhere. And then goji berries. And then wild ginseng.
Ginseng, that is very, very popular. As you know, you live in Phoenix, and you go to any 7-Eleven liquor store. What do they sell? Raw ginseng.
Ah, they do. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he also ate he shou vu.
He shou vu, is that a berry?
It is an herb, and I don't really know what that is or how it interacts with us, because I am not taking that particular one. But I also ate gotu kola. And the most important of them is the astragalus. And then, of course, there is something called jiaogulan tea, and that is, in China, it's called the Immortality Herb. And they are said that, see, we figured out now why people age and die. And that is because that there is one enzyme we don't get enough of, and that is called, it's in my book, you can read a lot about this, it's called telomerase. Telomerase. So when we get enough of this, then what happens is that the telomeres at the end of the chromosomes, they will not shorten when the cells divide themselves and multiply. Every time that the cells split up and make a new cell, these telomeres get a little bit shorter. And as we get older, we got a lot of cell divisions, and telomeres are getting so short that the chromosomes start fraying, and that means that the cells are not able to replicate themselves anymore. So we get stuck with old cells, and we become old and we die. If we have enough telomerase in the body, then these telomeres will not shorten and we will not age. And that is what I'm doing right now, and that's what I'm explaining in my book on how to do. In fact, there's another book also that speaks very highly of this, and they are explaining that the pharmaceutical companies got involved and they created a pharmaceutical that's called TA65 that is supposed to do the same thing. And in some people say that it does, but a lot of people, they have negative experiences because of side effects. But I'm using the natural one that comes through herbs and berries. And if you want to learn more about that, it's in the back of the book. So there is so much now that proves we have enormous capacity for old age. We just don't know how to do it en masse.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Now, why do you believe that people have stopped or have prevented this information?
Well, think of it this way. What would you think would happen to Social Security if people quit dying?
Well, I think they want us to die.
Yeah, but not before they can cash in on the bond.
That's right. That is absolutely it. They don't want us to die before that age.
Yeah. So, no, I think there we go again. See, there's no money in the solution. There's only money in the problem. And solving this problem of, if you look at South America and Africa and well, not China or Asia anymore, but Africa and South America, they're having kids like cats are having kittens. And there's too many people there. India, same way. they need to learn a few things about restricting the growth of the population so they could live better. And of course, for us, they become our cash cow. I mean, I speak of Americans now.
Let me ask you a question. Obviously, we know right here in the U.S. and other countries such as the United Kingdom, there is mind control in the form of propaganda and subliminal programming, which if many people don't know this, but there is a law on the books passed in the 70s that prevents you from using subliminal language or programming in TV and theaters, yet it still continues. So why are they wanting us to not know this information that you're giving us?
Well, it's all about the money, you know.
Always about the money, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have a question from the chat room. SoCal Dan.
Yeah, this is coming from David Lopez. He's asking, are these plants mostly only in China?
No, you can buy them in pretty much at any herbal store. What I can let you know where I get it, and I researched this from about 15, 20 different herbal stores, and I found the most reasonable one and the biggest one that'll get us the best price, and they pretty much have everything. That's pipingrock.com out of the East Coast somewhere. And in fact, on top of those prices that you see there, if you use my code, then you will get a 10% discount. And my code is capital AAK6NP. So that's where I get all my herbs from. And they've been very good to me. I ordered one day and it's on the way back to me the next day.
Yes, and that is a site that is hidden out there that it's not advertised on Fox or CNN.
Oh no!
So you have to find it in order to get the products.
Yeah.
Dan, was there a follow up to that?
No. He was mainly asking how he could get them.
Yeah, and of course I have, going to that website, you can get it perfectly well there. But I am adding some other things to it also, just for myself, and that is, if you go to my website, you can read about that. I've written quite a bit about what I do, and of course that's www.aage-nost.com.
So it's your first name dash your last name, AageNost.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for everybody watching this in MP4, just click on the link. And of course, after this goes on all the networks and plays over and over, you will see it in the archives with the link in the description. Now, Aage, I hate to change topics, but I'm getting a lot of people asking me questions about ETs. Jim Mars, not too long ago, was on here, and he wrote a book, Rise of the Fourth Reich, how the Nazis are not attacking us with arms and guns and bombs and all that, but are actually taking over our economy. And in that book, he also talks about how Hitler escaped Berlin and made his way to Antarctica. And when Admiral Byrd went down there with a huge armada of ships and started getting in and fighting these ships, ended up getting blasted and losing 2/3 of his troops before he just abandoned the operation and left.
Yeah, a lot of people got killed, and he lost a bunch of airplanes and several ships. So that was a bum trip for him. And I think he deserved it, because he was trying to, well, maybe that's my theory, but see, the thing is that we had Operation Paperclip right after the Second World War. The Russians had the same system. They also extracted about scientists and doctors and chemists and all kinds of people that they thought would do good for Russia out of Germany. And we invited, we're told 1,500, but there wasn't. There was 3,300 people that came over through Paperclip. Some of them we know about, but many of them disappeared into the government's dark pages, where like CIA now, and they help set up, monitoring stations and stuff like.
Yes.
And
And NSA. Not to
yeah,
forget
that too.
NSA monitoring.
And now the Americans, we kept the people that came from Germany.
That's
Now,
right.
the Russians did it different. They imported the Germans. They put them with Russian scientists, and they totally extracted from the brain of these Germans everything they knew. So when the Russians knew what the Germans knew, they had no more use for the Germans, and they repatriated them back to Germany. So the Germans had no chance of corrupting Russia for it. We kept them, and the Germans stayed in touch with each other. They had the Nazi agenda under the carpet, so to speak, in the United States, and they have implemented to the point where right now it is totally out front. You can see it in the elections.
Now, speaking of course, Project Paperclip, what did we do here in the United States? We brought over Wernher von Braun, who was the father of NASA because he was a V2 rocket specialist in Germany.
Yeah.
And all the top NASA scientists were, of course, Germans,
Yeah.
Nazis.
But Wernher von Braun, he also is known to have said, "Why do you want me to make rockets when we can use anti-gravity?"
That's right. Thank you for saying that. Can you expand on that? Because why are we still using 2,000-year-old Chinese technology of burning chemicals to shoot rockets in the sky or even the internal combustion engine in cars? We don't need that. Yet we're using it, I'm assuming, because of money.
Absolutely, and NASA we're told that it's a private agency, but it isn't. It's military, and it is kind of like a decoy because it keep people looking at NASA for space and for exploration and things. And then we have this secret space program and the breakaway society that have all the futuristic technologies that came out of Germany, came out of crashed flying saucers, came out of contacts with the Anunnaki and the tall whites, and they are building a society within bases on Earth and on the moon that is hundreds of years ahead of what we are using today.
That's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. And the sad part is this has been kept from the mainstream. Why? Because of money, right?
Yeah.
They want to continue to sell us oil and fossil fuels when we don't need that.
We don't need that because down now, speaking of the Germans, they had their own Roswell incident in Germany. And that incident was, in 1937, there were a crash in Germany by an alien spaceship. That was about 10 years before the American Roswell.
That's right.
And,
1936 Black Forest. That's right.
There you go. Yeah. And I think you're right. It might have been 36. Yeah. And that started the research around round aircraft. And then, of course, we had Maria Otisches that was channeling information from the Aldebaran system. And they tried to duplicate the metal in this aircraft that they found, and they couldn't make it work. It took them about 6 years to back engineer enough where they could create a multi-dimensional engine. And of course they called it the Thule engine, and that became the Bell, Die Glocke.
Ah, yes, die Glocke. That's right. That's right. Now, a lot of people say what happened in Kecksburg in '63, I believe, was a crash of the Bell, die Glocke, right?
Yeah, just because it looks that way, it wasn't the Bell, because the Bell was only an engine. It had to be attached to something in order to make it fly. And it will fly, but steering it, where would you have, in order to fly, you got to have a reason to fly, and just the engine alone wouldn't really go anywhere and do anything productive work. It had to be put into a craft. And the Germans did that. They started experimenting with round aircraft, and they had rockets attached to the periphery of it that went around, and that created the a lifting force on a propeller blade. Many blades actually, and then they started with the Haunebu 1. That was the first bell that was put into a flying disc. And then we had the Haunebu 2. And the Haunebu 1 was so dangerous that they killed every pilot that flew it, so that was abandoned. But the Haunebu 2 was more stable. Then we had the Haunebu 3. That was an intercontinental and planetary craft. It went to the moon. And the Haunebu 4, they sent that one, that was 170 meters across. And they sent that one to Mars. And they did not expect it to come back, because inside the Glocke they had these two rotors filled. The beginning they used red mercury, but they started to use a nuclear material instead. And that was much more effective, but it made the metal brittle. So they didn't think that the metal would hold together long enough for a return trip back from Mars. So what they stashed everything they needed into that Haunebu 4 in order to set up a base there, to be permanently there and never return. And the thing is that they lost contact with it, according to the papers. So nobody really knows what happened to that craft, if it broke up on the way there, or if it came there and crashed, or if it's still up there. I prefer to think they are still there, and they are reconnected with their fatherland in base 211 in Antarctica. I'm sure that they...
And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in a second. But before I go there, John Lear, legendary son of William Lear, who invented the Learjet, the A-Track, and John Lear himself was one of the first people to find out. He was friends with Bob Lazar. To find out about Area 51, or specifically S4. Talks about, he'll be on tomorrow night, and he talks about bases on the moon as well as German bases on Mars. What do you say about that?
Well, I have pictures on my website on some of the German bases on the moon. In fact, there are papers to this effect too, that the Germans, they found already built structures on the moon they could just refurnish and use as their own. And they was found over in Poland after the war. And this was written up in a guy from Norway, actually, that he was a prisoner of war in one of the camps in Poland under Germany. He said he saw these things flying around, and he was in contact with some of the guards after the war, and they told him that they had the papers showing that they had found something on the moon that they could inhabit. I have a picture of a building on the moon that is formed just like a huge swastika. And when the Germans saw that building, they fell in love and went and investigated to find it was totally empty and abandoned, so they occupied it, and they still do today.
And let's not forget that the reasons the Germans took the swastika as their main symbol was because of the deep occult studying that the top Germans, Nazis, were doing, and they took that from an ancient, I believe, Sumerian, am I correct? Sumerian symbol? Or
no, I think it comes out of the Rama Empire over in India. The Sumerians used it, but I think it came from India.
Gotcha. That's the origin, and so they adopted it. So when they see something like this on the moon, of course they're gonna fall in love with it, thinking it's destiny, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that on the moon, they have manufacturing plants up there. The people down at base 211 down at Antarctica, over in Neue Schwabenland, over there in the northeast side of the northern part of Antarctica, there is barren ground up there. There is warm water, and they found a huge cavern which they have expanded on. There's about 2 million people down there now, but many of them leave Antarctica. They have passports from the United States, Germany, South Africa, and other places. So some of them don't live down there permanently at all. They have just left and live in other countries, but they have businesses. I mean, the Germans from Antarctica have businesses in other countries under fake names or
That's right.
front companies.
Always
so they can
have. Always
create
have.
everything they need.
And I'm glad you brought up 211 because we've heard from many different guests about Antarctica and bases. I've never heard 211. Do you know where that comes from?
It was just I don't know the origin of the term, but it's in the German papers, so I don't know. It's old,
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the types of ETs. And do you know about a giant crashed saucer? Because there's been films of the moon, of exploration, which they say, I never believed that we never went to the moon. And I never believed that the moon footage was faked. But then I finally come to realize when I set up Stanton Friedman and Jay Widener as a debate on Art Bell, and they come to realize the same thing, that the moon footage that we saw was filmed by Stanley Kubrick. Why? Yeah. Because what was actually found in the moon was so drastic, and like you said, buildings were already there, including a ship that had crashed there, very, very large. Like I said, quarter miles, over 1,200 feet long. And in there was a dead body. It was one that they brought back. They labeled the Mona Lisa. And because of the lack of atmosphere on the moon, there was very, very little decomposition. And so because of that, they both agreed. And Stanton Friedman never agrees with anybody. He doesn't even believe Bob Lazar's story. But he says that is a great possibility. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I have a little different twist on this because I have NASA prints of long cigar-shaped ships floating across the surface on the moon. It's on my website. You can go to the picture gallery and you can see those things. I have several crashed flying cigar-shaped ship, the close-up photo of one of them. And the thing is that I have pictures of green vegetation on the moon, NASA print. I have pictures of clouds on the moon, NASA prints. There is an atmosphere up there, but it's a much lesser atmosphere than here. It is to the level of probably about 18 to 20,000 feet of altitude on Earth, equivalent up there. So if we think about that, that's going to make it a little hard to breathe if we just take a sudden switch. But look in the Himalayas, there are people that is living there every day of their life at 18,000 feet. They don't have a problem because they are used to it. And the thing is that this is something that we can see from Earth. There is clouds, and that's why there has to be an atmosphere, especially when you see green vegetation. You can see that also on my website, in the NASA print on it. So there is something up there that makes it livable for people.
That's right. And what about Venus? Do you know about that? Because John Lear talks about Venus and the fake photograph or fake video of the parachute landing, which is impossible if you have such high heat. And let me say one more thing. We have interviewed on this show a person who worked at NASA whose sole job was to take NASA photographs of the moon and other planets and to Photoshop out the buildings, crafts, or any anomalies such as pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. I have pictures of 3 different pyramids on the moon. In fact,
exactly.
Here's something really important I want to tell you. If you really want to see flying discs or foreign off-world crafts. Get your hands on the 4th generation night vision goggles. And go outside at
Why
night.
4th generation, if you
Because
don't mind?
they can see. They absorb light and they can see into the higher light spectrum than the 3rd and the 2nd and the 1st and our eyes can. So when it goes through the night vision goggles, somehow it is lowered in vibration so our eyes can see it. And this is what they used over in the Middle East. They gave it to 4th generation to the military over there, and they got all kinds of complaints. They came back and said, what's the problem? We see people, and then when we take the goggles off, they're not there.
Yes.
And so they confiscated all the 4th generation and gave them back to 2nd generation.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Now, we have about 15 minutes left on the show, so what I wanted to ask you was, let's go back to what we started on. Your book, which is literally what we can accomplish with our brains, what we are told. Okay, I'm gonna say this. I say this a lot on the show, but I'm gonna repeat this yet again. Our brains are so fast. I mean, Dr. Greer even talks about the speed of thought being faster than anything. So, when you speak, what you do is you take your thoughts and you put them into words, and then you speak in a linear language, which is why when you mentioned that as children, when we start school, you start school in a linear method, which slows your thinking down, as opposed to openness and having such things as telepathy and imagination, which they suppress. Now that is, I believe, is wrong. Now, if you can access your brain and use it, you can do things like as you mentioned, mental time travel or remote viewing or other things. Let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, and we got to remember that in a mind-created universe, everything you see around you and that you find in this universe where you think you live, in the physical universe, is mind-created. Guess what that means? That means your brain is also mind-created. With other words, it is not really real. It is an illusion created by thought. But it is a very effective illusion because everything within the same structural vibration will interact and have an effect on each other. So it can work. The brain is the hardware, but the mind is the software that is laid on top of the hardware and allows for the hardware to do what it does. So
right.
when we
That's
decide that we are going to do something, let's take it to the ridiculous almost and say, I want to travel in time to the future and see something.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now, when we step out...
Now, let me ask you this. When we travel to the future, is this a subjective future, meaning that only what your life has, your experiences have had throughout your life will bring you to that future? Or is it a future, as you mentioned, which is universal to everybody?
No, it is specific to you. Because when you go to the future, there are many different timelines going into the future. So you are going into the future, going up a timeline that is constructed out of everything you have thought and done and experienced in the past. Now, if you are tomorrow now to make a total break of what you have done before and go a totally different direction, you will start a new timeline going into the future. So from there on, you may have a different future than what you otherwise would. And that all depends on what's in your mind. If you decide you're going to go into the future, whichever timeline you end up going into the future, you will see. And in the back of the book, I have a section on how to do this type of time travel. And I have found it to be effective. I've actually experienced some of these things. So it is there. But remember, the timeline, they can change if you change your thinking and your actions. Then you create new timelines. So if you go on what you have done and experienced in the past, we are somewhat predictable of what we can experience in the future.
Real quick, we have another question from the chat room. I'm going to give it to the Dan, Chat with Dan, and of course Johnny Webb. If you're still here, of course, pop in if you have any questions. But Dan, what do you got in the chat room?
This is coming from Joe Hernandez in Reno, Nevada. He's asking, does this mean that conscious choice is what controls the future?
You create the future by what is in your mind. Now that don't necessarily only mean in your brain, but what is in your mind. Because when we think of the brain, we think about short-term and long-term memory, and that's pretty much it. But the mind has much more to it than that. It has the past, present, and future totally accessible to it.
That's
so
right.
We can go and look at the past, we can look at the future, and we can decide. We can do this in meditation, and we can decide on what to do. I have done this. I have gone into the future and visualized things so much in detail, I know it. And then I go back and forth and visit that thing. Every time I go back and forth, I lay down attractor strings through it. So that you get drawn
tractor
up.
Springs? Can you talk about that?
Attractor strings, those are little tiny strings of light.
Okay.
And the more you go back and forth to it, the stronger this attractor string become, and it draws you up that timeline to that thing in the future that you have created in your mind. Mm-hmm. So now what happens, if you create something in the future that is wonderful for yourself, your family, and everybody, and keep going back and forth to it, and then do everything you can physically in order to help it happen, it is very difficult for it not to happen, because you have already created it, you placed it in your timeline, and you are drawn up that timeline. You should eventually end up there.
Manifesting is what you're talking about. And let me say one more thing.
That's the word.
Us humans have created time. Time does not exist in the Akashic records or in the universe, right? It's a man-made thing.
Exactly. But that's a hard one to convince people of, because when you are looking at your watch, what do you see, you know?
Time.
So the thing is, that time is a construct in order to have experience in a physical reality. If time does not exist in a physical reality, we would not have experiences like we have now. And we came here to learn and grow physically while we experience physical things, because the spirit or the soul or the consciousness will learn and grow from physical experiences. So time has a function in the physical.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's so hard for people to fathom, because you look at your expensive Rolex, or for me, I just look at my phone for the time. But we're going in a linear time. But in our minds, we can have the past, present, and future at the same time. Our minds really can do so much more than what we're limited to and what we're told about, right?
Yeah, the mind, well, let me turn that maybe just a little bit on the side. The mind can still do it, but we don't know we can do it.
Correct, because we have been told we cannot do it, right?
Yeah, we have been brainwashed into thinking like we have limitations when there are none.
Now, since we are getting near the end, I would love to ask you how you can tell the global audience that we have how they can do this. Steps that they can do this.
Okay, two ways. You can learn how to develop your mind to a super mind, and all the tricks that you need, or not tricks necessarily, but methods and practices that you can create a super mind from reading the book. But shorter than that, let's take it that if you wanted, you know, we live in strange times, dangerous times right now. And I'm not worried at all, because I have created something in the future for me that will happen. So whatever happened elsewhere is not going to affect me that much. So what you want to do, find something in the future that you want more than anything else, and then build on it. Go there and visualize it. See, this is the reason why prayers don't work, because we're using the wrong language. English, German, French, that's not the language of the spiritual world. It is emotion, love, vivid, colorful pictures, and things like that. So start visualizing the thing in the future. Put details into it. Put emotion into it. Put love into it. And build it. See other people enjoying it with you. And then go back and forth and visit that thing over and over and over again. And then, like we said before, you get drawn up that timeline to it. And you do whatever you can physically in order to make this happen. You're going to find that you're not going to be alone with this, because people will fall onto your path that want to help you do it.
Yes.
Things will just come out of nowhere. Money will come out of nowhere to help you do things that you need to do. And there are ideas.
You have to get to your goal, right?
Absolutely, because that's
in detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We before we end this time, we have a question from Johnny, who's usually in London, but is in my studio now. Johnny Webb.
Good evening, Aage.
Hey.
We've got a Facebook question. It's a new country that we haven't had on before, and it comes from Murma in Micronesia.
43rd country. Nice.
She asks, how can we get telepathy?
Telepathy is really simple. It is a function of vibration, because thoughts, they are operating in the frequency of gravity waves, and they travel at a minimum of 63 times the speed of light.
Yes, that's right. Thought is the fastest.
Yeah, wow, amazing. You knew that. How about that?
Yes.
And what we want to do is to start conditioning the mind to going places and visiting with people, visiting their mind, just like going down the street looking at somebody's back of the head, telling them, turn around, I want to meet you. Turn around. Say that word in your mind as well as you visualize them turning around at the same time. You start exercising the channel. And there's a few more things to it, but explained very well in the book on how to actually become a pretty good psychic. I don't have this on my bio anywhere, but 20-some years ago I had a radio show out of Florida, me and a master psychic. We were giving psychic readings on the radio, and we got so good at it. We knew they made
I know someone in Florida who does remote viewing and remote influence. Gerald O'Donnell. Do you know him?
No, but I know of her.
Okay. Gotcha. Johnny, do you have a follow-up?
Not at the moment. It's been a bit quiet trying to reconnect to my computer in London to get these readings, so please excuse me.
No problem. Well, we're running out of time, so this is what I wanted to do. Aage, if you can, let's talk about your book, Spiritual Science, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access the Universal Consciousness. Now, like I said, everybody, go to drjradiolive.com. Click on the books and videos link and find Aage Nost, and it will take you to his author's page in Amazon, and you can get it there.
I have one comment on the book that I just want to see if I can add to it. And that
Sure.
I wasn't planning to write this book, but it just happened. And that is that I was sitting in meditation, and which I've done for over 50 years. Now, in that meditation, I suddenly had a very strange feeling, and I had this movie start going off in front of my face with my eyes closed. So the whole universe was downloaded into my mind in concept and detail in a matter of about probably close to 5 seconds. And I had basically full understanding of it. When I opened my eyes up, it kind of scared me at the moment. I really didn't know what to do with it, So I grabbed a pad and a pen and I sat and wrote for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And after I was done writing, then I read it and told myself there's no way I can write about this because they're going to think I'm nuts. And
That's the mainstream.
I talked to another guy that was there. He was a very level-headed fellow, and he said, no. This makes perfect sense, he says. Have you heard about quantum physics? And I said, yeah. He says, there's this book. You should go get it. And he says, the title of the book was The Self-Aware Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, they talk about this in this. So I went and got the book, and I read it, and there it was. So, the concepts behind what I saw, not so much in detail. I have seen much more detail. I have seen inventions that run on absolutely nothing physical. And
like Tesla, right?
yeah, some of those principles are very, very real.
Yes.
And I'll be doing something with that sometime here shortly, but I haven't done much yet. But these things created that book, and you'll read about some of the things that I saw in the book.
I have one final question here from, like I said, since we are short on time, we've been trying to pick the best questions. Okay, this is Kelly. It's either Gillian or Jillian. It's with G. From Chicago, Illinois. Should we meditate daily?
And there's a very simple answer to that. Yes.
For how long? How many times a day?
There is a saying here, and I absolutely subscribe to that one, and that is, everybody should meditate 20 minutes per day. But if you are too busy, then you need to meditate an hour.
Yes, that's right. You have to get your mind quiet.
Because meditation is your gate to the higher consciousness.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Now, I want to remind everybody that the name of the show, DRJ Radio Live, Dr. J Radio Live, is the same name for every social media account, from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, YouTube, where we archive our shows after they're done on all of the networks. Late Night in the Midlands, PSN, Deprogram, and of course Coast to Coast PM Radio Network. And of course there's several others that you can find. There's I believe over 30 chat rooms in Facebook, not to mention 2 chat rooms that we have officially, which SoCal Dan is monitoring. So we encourage you to check them out, and of course get Mr. Nost's book through our website. Again, all you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com, click on books and videos on the link on the top, and it'll take you. Just scroll down to Aage Nost, and then you'll click on it. It'll take you to Amazon, and that's where you'll find the book, Spiritual Science, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access Universal Consciousness. Now, with that being said, since we're going a little over time, I want to ask you, Mr. Nost, if you have any final questions for the audience, or final thoughts, I mean.
Yeah, I tell everybody this, that first of all, the book is written on several levels of consciousness. If somebody read the book 3 times, what will happen is that your life will never be the same. And when you read it the 3rd time, you need to call me and get in touch with me, because then you are ready for stage 2. Okay. And there is other higher knowledge that we will then talk about. Because
can we expect a second book from you soon?
Yes, probably not totally soon, but I've been working on that, but I've been busy with other things, so I've kind of neglected it. But that's going to be more nuts and bolts about what the universe is, and how also what to expect and how to interact with it.
Well,
so
we encourage everybody out there, now 43 countries listening, or at least asking questions, for you to do this test and reach stage 2, and of course reach out to Aage Nost. Again, through his website, Aage-Nost.com. Again, you will see this written when this is archived after it plays on all the networks. With that being said, I'd like to thank, of course, my guest, Aage Nost, for joining us tonight. And, of course, my team. We have a not me, thank me. But, of course, we have Johnny Webb, who is in LA, and Tom Schaefer in Miami, and SoCal Dan, and, of course, others mentioned, such as Lucy and Kevin in Colorado. With that being said, the most important people that need to be thanked are you, the listener. Join us tomorrow night for the legendary John Lear live on the show. That's your time to ask him live questions before it goes to the other networks. And with that being said, this is Dr. J, and we are officially signing off.